Perfect.
Okay.
Sounds good. Whatever easiest.
Did we go live?
Yes.
All right. All right, thank you. Welcome everybody to our Forest Lake Area Schools regular virtual school board meeting, Thursday, December 17th, 2020. Member Clerk, please take a roll call.
Member Corcoran?
Here.
Member Corcoran is here. Member Ketto?
Here.
Member Ketto is here. Member Olson?
Here.
Member Olson is here. Member Raphael?
Present.
Member Raphael is present. Member Tyson?
Here.
Member Tyson is here. Member Peterson? Member Peterson is absent, and Member Luthner is present.
All right, thank you. And I'd also like to welcome all the people that are watching us online. We really appreciate you kind of watching the work here and the way we deliberate over it. And glad you're here, and welcome all the other staff members who are also online. So our first agenda item is number 3, our COVID-19 update. Dr. Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will share my screen here. And what I'd like to do is spend some time talking about our current model and a plan to make a shift in our current learning model, specifically at the elementary. But before I get into that, I want to first acknowledge that we are now 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks in distance learning across the district, with distance learning fully now at the elementary and the middle school. When we made this shift, we spoke to distance learning 2.0, and board members who have kids in our system, I think you would attest to the reality and the fact that our distance learning 2.0 is a dramatic improvement and dramatically different from the distance learning that we implemented in a very short order of time last spring. We are engaging kids synchronously every single day. Secondary students are following their regular schedule. Elementary students, all the way down to some of our youngest learners, are managing and navigating, some in a very independent way, large whole group instruction, small group instruction. Our staff, I can assure you, are not just keeping kids engaged and holding learning and holding court with learning. We are truly advancing learning in distance learning. It's just remarkable to think this time last year, before we entered this pandemic world of ours currently, this type of learning was just a remote concept, and now we are operating at a very high level with distance learning. However, it's not to say that distance learning is easy for our staff. It comes with a great deal of challenges and effort. Our staff should be commended and applauded for the amazing amount of skill and talent and effort they're bringing into this every single day. And at the same time, on the other end of the screen, if you will, are kids and families. And while I mentioned that kids are doing a remarkable job engaging, and the level of attendance is really impressive as well. It doesn't come without a great deal of challenge at home. Challenge from childcare needs, adjusted work schedules. Some of the adjustments have direct impact on economics and resources, not to mention just the stress and the strain that trying to keep maybe 1, 2, or 3 elementary or middle school kids navigating through the different schedules and demands that teachers have for them in a digital world. I have heard from many families who have articulated their pleasure and how impressed they are with the distance learning that we're providing, but have also, in a very articulate and clear way, have talked about the stress and the strain that distance learning places on families. We fully understand that. We fully appreciate that. And we are doing our best to adjust to that and meet families where they're at. transitioning now to the governor's announcement yesterday. The governor provided an updated set of expectations for school districts with respect to especially our youngest learners at the elementary level. What the governor shared yesterday was an updated set of guidance and expectation around distance learning and school models, prioritizing our youngest learners, primarily our elementary level students. The governor shared and stressed that we are really entering a phase where we should be putting less reliance on county case data that we have been monitoring since July 30th. Largely, let me just spend a moment and talk about that for a minute. On July 30th, the state testing level was far less than the overall state testing level by factors of 3 or 4. The testing levels have gone up across the state. The metric that we started with on July 30th was simply a metric of total cases in the state and relative to 10,000 residents at the county level over a 2-week period of time. Simply a factor of total cases. The more you test, the more cases. Therefore, those numbers on that metric are going to rise. On July 30th, I don't believe the state envisioned the level of testing that would be in place come the start of the school year into October, November, and now December. So the governor, I think rightfully, is saying there should be less reliance on the county metric and more on other factors like test positivity rate, as well as our ability to staff, operate, and manage our school system based on exposure to COVID, close contacts, and folks being infected with COVID. So again, less focus on county case data. And along with that, in terms of the expectation and the shift that the governor is asking districts to start making, is an increase in safety measures and mitigation efforts in our schools. The governor provided some target dates to be working with the goal of rolling our youngest learners back into elementary. Most districts across the state are in distance learning, and the goal here now is to begin to shift elementary kids back to school. With the guidance that we received from the governor yesterday, we are presenting this plan and this schedule for our students across the district. The governor set January 18th as the earliest date on which a school district can bring students from distance learning back into school at the elementary level. So we are proposing and planning to bring our youngest learners first out of distance learning, beginning with grades kindergarten through 2nd grade. The guidance we received from the governor states that we can bring no more than 3 grade levels in at a time, and then spend 2 weeks with that grade level rolled into the system before introducing another set of grades back into the school. With those concepts in mind, again, starting on January 19th, with January 18th being a scheduled day off for students, grades K through 2 will return for full in-person learning, not hybrid, but full in-person learning. And then 2 weeks later, on February 1st, grades 3 through 5 will come in. Again, we can only bring 3 grade levels in at a time. 2 weeks thereafter, on February 16th, would be grade 6. February 15th is the Monday of that week, and that's a scheduled day off for students with professional development for staff. We are still looking for clearer guidance with respect to early childhood and preschool programming, with whether or not they count as a grade level in terms of the max of 3 grade levels coming in at any given time. We're currently in a hybrid with early childhood with 1 day a week in-person learning, so that may factor in the start of or the rolling in for more in-person learning with early childhood. So that's yet to be determined. We also know that we currently have kids in, let's say, 4th grade or 5th grade who are on an IEP, who are coming in a day or two a week for added service with their special education teacher and other supports. The CLP that is driving that currently will determine whether or not those students will continue to come in while grades K through 2 are coming in the first phase of this roll-in. So this will be the plan. The good news is, and I would point out that when we went into distance learning, we identified January 21st as the date on which we would evaluate our current model and begin to consider adjustments to that model. January 18th lines up rather well with that projected date. January 18th, in our case, the 19th, buys us a good period of time after the upcoming break where families and the community maybe tend to be exposed to COVID, and we can use that 2 weeks to let those cases play their way out so that we can reduce potential risk at that time. So the date lines up well for us. It gives us almost a full month for us to adjust and plan and put mitigation efforts in place. With respect to increased safety and mitigation efforts, these are a list of mitigation efforts that the state is providing and expecting that we implement. Again, I will emphasize that the state is truly expecting districts across the state in distance learning to begin to roll our youngest learners back into school for in-person learning. Along with bringing kids back in, the state is providing on-site school-based COVID-19 saliva testing for all staff. The testing will be provided every other week for all staff, beginning actually January 4th. Again, we'll be in distance learning that, but we still have some students coming in on an IEP or receiving specialized service, and testing would be available for any staff member working with kids. And that would include testing available for bus drivers, food service personnel, paraprofessionals, teaching staff, etc. It's important to note that testing is optional for staff. There's no requirement, but it will be made available. Face masks and face shields must be worn together at the same time by all staff who are working with students. There's an expectation of 6 feet of separation between educators and students, the best we can, trying to minimize that cumulative 15 minutes that would create a close contact. Face coverings must be worn when engaging in outdoor physical education for indoor physical education for students, indoor recess, indoor physical education classes again, and when exercising in the gym. So face coverings still expected for students. All student meals at the elementary level must be held in the classroom. It's clearly we're not going to be eating outside in January and in January and February, but if this continues through the rest of the year, perhaps we could be outside. But for the time being, all meals, breakfast, and lunch will be held in the classroom. Specialist lesson must be held in the classroom or outside. Again, weather permitting, that includes music in the classroom, lessons, as well as media. Physical education classes may continue to be held indoors outside of the individual classrooms, so long as students and staff are wearing face coverings. So again, physical education classes in the gym, students are wearing face masks. For in-person only, 3 feet of physical distancing or more is strongly recommended for students. And classes must remain in pods, and we will limit and restrict the mixing of classrooms, again, just to reduce the level of exposure between students. So I will pause there and take any, well, let me hold on and let me get through a couple of more slides here, and then I'll pull out of the presentation so I can see board members on the screen. Grades 7 and 8, based on the governor's guidance yesterday, Grades 7 and 8 is held to the previous set of guidance that we received all the way back on July 30th. So still paying attention to the different data points, test positivity rate, local cases, our ability to manage and operate our schools. We set at that time, that the time that we moved to distance learning, January 21st, the date on which we will evaluate and adjust our model if possible. We'll continue with distance learning as I described and explained earlier. Minnesota State High School League activities, practices can begin on January 4th. I will point out that we will adhere to that and allow our kids to begin practice at that time, provided that we can do that in a safe way with all of the mitigation efforts that we had talked about at the time that we went to distance learning. These kids will be exposed only to their teammates when they come in for practice. We will restrict and minimize exposure between teams and athletes. The date on which competitions will begin is still to be determined by the high school league and the governor, but we will start practice on January 4th. We can all understand the value and importance of getting kids active and engaged in what they love to do as all part of social emotional health. At the same time, we need to balance practicing at gym while we're in distance learning. Again, all these pieces begin to play together as we account for learning and social emotional well-being and health for our students, with ultimately the goal of bringing our students back for in-person learning. The factors we will use on January 21st for grade 7 through 12, again, are county data, but again, less reliance on county-wide total COVID cases. Test positivity rate is a more and more powerful and relevant tool for us to look at. Local cases, person-to-person spread that we're seeing either on our buses, in athletics, in our elementary school, school-level cases, influenza-like illness, all of our the success of our school mitigation efforts, and perhaps most importantly, our ability to staff our operation. Do we have enough bus drivers to run our bus routes? And is our food service staff complete that we can run our food service operation? Are we able to provide sufficient coverage with our teachers, or do we have a lot of teachers out? All those things continue to be important factors. And I will emphasize that as we make this transition at the elementary level, we should not be mistaken that we are home free. We're still in a pandemic. The vaccinations are a ways off for students and staff. We expect to continue to see cases. And as we see cases, we continue to expect that we will have classes on quarantine or kids who are quarantined based on close contacts. And we will need to continue to adjust our models and adjust our systems based on what we're seeing in the classroom. We hope that we don't have to adjust out of in-person learning, but again, we have to adjust to and respond to the cases that we see and our ability to operate and manage our learning systems. So with that, I will take any questions that you might have.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Massey. That was a great presentation. And I think you're starting to anticipate my questions because I saw sports and ECFE already called out. I know we don't want to make assumptions, but are we going to try and keep the ECFE experience as parallel and close to the K-6 experience as possible, or are they going to be doing their own thing? Which way are we leaning? Because I know it's supposed to feel like you're in the school already as a preschooler.
Absolutely. We consider our preschool program to be another grade level within our schools. They're an integral part of the culture. They're an integral part of the learning sequence that we have designed in our district. Our goal and plan will be to bring them into full in-person learning along with the other grade levels. The question, we just have enough questions out there for MDE to answer on whether or not, because preschool is currently coming in 1 day a week, they're technically in a hybrid while the other grades are in distance learning. Does that factor differently, or would preschool and early childhood be considered a grade level as we roll grade levels in? Because again, we can only bring 3 grade levels in at a time. So we're still waiting for clarification there.
Member Tyson.
So Steve, yes, great presentation, and I'm very excited to be starting to integrate and get our kids back in classroom in front of their teachers. I have a question about the increased mitigation. Do we have the saliva kits and the shields in our possession, or is that something we order and we're going to hope that it gets here by the 19th, or do we have those things?
Good question. The state already started providing training for staff who will be not administering, but monitoring the saliva testing. We will be given a date every 2 weeks in which our staff will have the opportunity to test. They will provide a tool through which we will indicate how many tests we need. So that's forthcoming here in the next number of days. Earlier in the year, all staff members received face coverings and a shield. The state will provide additional face masks and shields, and we will indicate to the state the number of shields and face masks that we're going to need. Let me just add that it's very clear that teaching with a face mask is a challenge. Teaching with a face mask and a shield is an added challenge. This is not an easy endeavor for our staff. It complicates the teaching process for sure. Trying to maintain 6 feet of distance complicates the learning experience and our ability to engage kids in learning. Yet, these are measures that if we can effectively implement and pull off, the benefit is we have kids back in school. It's evident to all of us that our challenge and opportunity is to endure the next 4 to 5 months. And we may not be completely home free by next year, but I think we all envision a very different and some semblance of normal when we start next year. So we've all heard we see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think there's some truth to that from everything we're seeing with vaccines, that we need to work our way through the next 4 to 5 months. It's not going to be easy for our staff. It's not going to be easy for our students, but the ultimate goal is to have kids face to face back in the classroom where we know our kids do best.
All right, Member Kettle.
Thank you. Oh, can I ask one more question, Member Chair Rob? One more
Sure.
question, quick, Steve. Could you clarify a little bit more? If we're relying less on county data, is our COVID team then going to ramp up what they do to count like local cases and track what we have going on in our district at our different buildings?
Yeah, I think we've already got the tools and measurements in place to track local cases. Our staff we have a mechanism through which staff are reporting illness and positive tests and close contacts and needing to quarantine, whether it's a spouse or a family member who becomes positive and now the staff member needs to stay home. All these things have an impact on our staff. We have a reporting mechanism. If a staff receives a positive COVID test, we do have contact tracing teams that then intervene. Those teams are already in place. We've been doing that all year. They get quite busy, and we're rather really busy just before we move to distance learning, and they're ready to go when we're back in person for sure.
Member Kettle.
Versus a question, I have a comment again. It relates to a number of emails that I've received from parents in the district, and one stood out among many, and that was a comment that the parent felt that their child was better off being in school than in the community because the schools were a safer place to be. That was backed up, I think, this week. I was watching the news and Dr. Fauci was on. And of course, I'm an admirer of Dr. Fauci, and I believe in what he says. And he said in his report that right now kids are better off being in school because it is a safer place. So I'm glad that we're moving this way. You know, I sometimes worry about that as a parent, you know, having kids back in schools, but I think it is a safer place. So I'm glad we're moving the way we are.
Yeah, and Member Kettle, I would concur. I would say, however, that the decision we made 3-4 weeks ago was really necessary, given the spike. We have seen a decrease in cases statewide, locally. Test positivity rate at that time was on some given days approaching 20%. Today's test positivity rate was below 6%. So we are seeing the effort statewide, the effort the adherence people are giving to the CDC guidelines, following those. All of those are making a difference. There's less COVID based on the positivity rate in our communities. That puts us in a much better situation to run school.
Member Corcoran?
I also want to thank Dr. Massey for his great presentation. And I think that we're following the guidelines and giving parents time to plan. And especially knowing after Christmas that they have an opportunity to get their kids back in school. But also, I know we discussed earlier the fact that some parents will still be worried and nervous, that they also have options to keep, I know you talked about the change of Ranger Academy, kind of the timeline of that, possibly if they want to go back in-person learning, or if the in-person learning wants to go to Ranger Academy. I mean, can you kind of elaborate a little bit more about that timeline, Steve, of that time frame?
At the start of the year, we set semester time as an opportunity families would have to reassess whether or not they wanted to move from Ranger Academy back into the classroom. We will provide that opportunity that would then correspond with the shift back into school. So we're not going to use September 22nd, the end of the semester, but with K-1-2 coming back on the 19th, that will be that opportunity for Ranger Academy families if they want to move back to the classroom. And conversely, if families feel the need to move to Ranger Academy, that opportunity would be there for those families too.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was talked about. Thank you.
And Dr. Massey, my question would just be, it wasn't that long ago that we quit doing this. Now we're coming back to it. What are some of the things that we're looking at that kind of assure us that we're not going to have, like last time we had a number of staff problems kind of with getting staff in place because we were having people quarantining. And what do you see as different now that's going to allow this to be more successful? And obviously last time we were seeing the numbers skyrocketing, and now we're seeing them in a much better place. But if you could talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, I would be super concerned if the governor's expectation was to come back January 4th, right after the holiday break, given us that 2.5, almost 3 week time frame for things to hopefully mitigate down, as we've seen since we moved to distance learning. We didn't see the spike in Minnesota after Thanksgiving that everybody expected. That's a tribute to people following the guidance and the guidelines. Hopefully we'll see a similar trend coming out of the winter holiday break here. We have that time frame for things to settle down if there is a spike. I moved out of my slideshow, and I'm not going to go back to it, but I moved out of it one slide too early because my last slide was titled Schools and Communities Working Together. And I stressed there with a few icons. One is, we're being asked by the CDC to wear masks. We're asked to maintain social distancing, try to avoid large gatherings, test when not feeling well, stay home when we're not feeling well, wash our hands frequently, if we all do those things, we stand a much better chance to stay in as we're working our way back into the classroom. That is I guess a call to action for our community as a whole, our families, our staff, all of us to do what we can. We know you can get COVID at the grocery store. So this isn't about judgment that if you end up with COVID, you're being careless. We know that's not true. But there are things we can all do to lessen our exposure and to lessen our risk. And I would call for all of us across the district and our community as a whole to do everything we can for the next number of months to get us through the school year so we can have kids back in the classroom.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I would just,
I just have one, Rob. Sorry, couldn't get my raised hand up. Steve, I know I've had some emails, and as you know as well, parents that don't have athletes or kids in sports worry about, the kids that are in sports and the spread there, and how they so want to be hybrid again and face-to-face. They felt that their students just learned so well and did so much better with that social interaction, and of course seeing their teacher face-to-face. So can you talk about how you feel that, that we do have a good handle on that?
I don't think I can say that there isn't risk there, but that risk is mitigated by the fact that we're not going to put all of our basketball teams in the gym at the same time for practice, where they're interacting and mixing between teams. Teams will, like at the elementary, grade levels will be grouped and not interacting with other grade levels. Same with teams. We will be in and out of the gyms where we're not exposing ourselves to other kids, minimal use of the locker room. And again, there will be a serious call for our kids to really refrain from social gatherings outside of school the best they can, keeping those gatherings small. In the fall, when we saw cases on our teams, it more often than not was social gatherings outside of the actual practice itself. So there are a lot of things we can all do, but it would be unfair to say there isn't risk. Of course there is, but we have mitigation efforts there as well. And we think the benefit of continuing with that opportunity and activity is really important, provided we can do it in a safe way. But if there's a positive case, the team gets shut down. It's that simple. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of incentive for teams to really do the best they can to follow the guidance.
Right. And I know we heard from our athletic director at our last month's meeting, and he gave an update saying that, coaches and everybody are very responsible and very proactive about, mask wearing and, keeping the kids on track with staying apart and following those mitigation efforts. So thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Yep. I have one on the sports continuation. Is there testing available for the sports teams also? I know that many times if there's the threat of losing an activity, people may be inclined to not test, even if they're feeling a little under the weather. Trying to walk the line of not putting any personal blame, but also a sense of community kind of responsibility to not come in if you're feeling sick and to test to see. So I'm not sure how to put that message out in the most kind way possible, but running the risk is so risky, and it'll be okay for a certain number of times, and then one time it just won't be. So trying to encourage coaches and kids to have frank discussions on the subject.
Yeah, and what I would say to that, Member Luthner, is the winter season is a long season. And if somebody were a close contact or get ill, it's 10 to 14 days. There's part of the season to come back to. If we ignore the guidance around staying home when you're sick or get tested when you're not feeling well or you feel like you've been exposed, is a gesture to your teammates as well, because the sooner you identify that and stay home, the less exposure you're going to create for the team. If it spreads throughout the team and the team shut down, it could be for a longer period of time.
That makes a lot of sense. So missing one game is way better than missing your whole season.
Or a large part of it, yes.
Good enough for the Vikings.
All right. I mean, so just to kind of wrap up, I mean, for me, I appreciate Dr. Massey that you kind of ended with talking about kind of the shared responsibility between the community and the school district and all of us keeping safe. And in doing that, really helping the schools out. You know, I mean, we all want our kids learning the best they can. And, you know, and I think a lot of us believe that that's with our youngest kids back in school. And so I'm glad to see this. I'm glad to see us being thoughtful and trying to work to transition kids back into those schools and take some of the pressure off the parents and really help those kids, you know, during a very critical part of their education. And, you know, so I'm glad to see it. I also want to thank everybody who's been sending emails. One of the things I'm just eternally grateful for is that this has been a very stressful time for these schools and for our employees and for our parents and for our kids. And yet I feel like more than any other time, we've just been one community working together, keeping our schools running, keeping our kids learning. And it's been a really nice thing. So I really appreciate all the emails, comments people have been making. And, you know, we're listening and we're trying to do the right thing and get our kids the best education they can get in a very weird time. So, all right. Agenda item 4, approve consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve 4.1 through 4.3?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Hi, Rob. I just wanted to, there was a couple of retirements on the last month's agenda, or actually the first part of December that I missed the meeting. And I just wanted to do a special shout out to Diane Georgie and Carolyn Latati. Really, I just wanted to just say what great leaders they have been in our district for many years. I mean, Diane's always there with a welcoming smile, and her professionalism is just cannot be matched. And over the years, she's taken on, you know, a lot of work over the years with short staff and things. So I just wanted to make sure that I wish them well in their retirement. And I said that we're going to miss their depth of knowledge and experience with our district and our staff, and that there are going to be some big shoes to fill because they have been amazing leaders in our district. So congratulations and welcome to retirement. Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome. Member Luthner?
And mine's on this month's staff. Paige is a person who was probably the first member of administration team that I interacted with as a brand new confused mom who messed up something in a registration process, and she walked me through it and fixed it, and it was no big deal. And she made me feel not like I made a mistake, but by that I was doing the right thing, straightening it out. And so I hope she's going on to bigger and better things. And I hope that whoever replaces her is just as good and can help out the really nervous, stressed out parents who come into her office.
Well said. I'm gonna take a minute to mention Lisa Mansell, who was a kindergarten teacher at Forest View, 38 years of service. You know, that's a lot of kids' lives you touched, 38 years. And so I just wanted to mention her name and say thank you for the service and thank you for what you've done for the kids of Forest Lake. So, all right, any other comments? If there are no other comments, Member Clerk, could you please take a roll call?
Member Ketto? Member Ketto votes aye. Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Tosin votes aye. Member Peterson is absent. Member Luthner votes aye. Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye.
All right, thank you. All right, action items, agenda item 5.1, approve the 2020-2022 bus driver and aides employment agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've got a ratified agreement with the bus drivers and aides, and that was ratified on December 11th. I'm happy to report that this tentative agreement is within the school board parameters that we received earlier in the year. I'm going to present it to you with a recommendation for approval with these following changes. On page 18, you'll see an adjusted meal rate allocation increase of $1 per each of those different meal levels. On page 24, you will see a $250 annual increase to District 403B contribution at each of those different levels. And then you will also see on page 24 an adjustment to the probationary period to now be stated as 1 calendar year from the date of hire versus number of hours. So we have a kind of a time frame built into that piece now, and a comparable increase on page 25 to our substitute bus drivers as well on the probationary period. And then with respect to wage increases, you'll see on page 31 the related wage increases for the first year of the contract and the second year of the contract. The rate increase for the first year is a 2% wage increase. And in the second year, the rate increase is 0%. And in addition to the wage piece, there's an added memorandum of understanding provided in the contract. You'll see that on page 33. I'll read it here because you'll see this in the next contract that we're going to talk about as well. If the school district determines it is in a position to reopen the salary schedules in the employment contracts due to a better than anticipated financial position for the 21-22 school year, then all of the classified union contracts throughout the district, including Teamsters number 320, could be reopened for adjusting the 21-22 salary schedules that are listed here in this contract. So with that, administration recommends approval.
All right, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you. Do we have any discussion?
I'll just start by saying I'm glad we're able to get this ratified. I obviously wish it was more. They deserve more. We're not a school district without our bus drivers. It really starts with them. So we appreciate all they do, all of their hard work, especially during these very difficult times, and all of the roles that they've helped in during COVID. So happy to get this passed.
Any other comments?
I just
Go
have
ahead.
a question regarding that new amendment on page 33. Steve, is that going to be something we're going to see across a lot of the contracts now?
All classified contracts, as stated in the memorandum of understanding, will have a similar MOU.
Okay, thank you.
That was my question as well. Thank you.
All right, and I would just like to say also thank you to our bus drivers. I have such warm memories of walking my kids down to the bus stop and the Forest Lake bus driving up and waving. And I know that experience, waving to the bus driver. I know so many parents have had that experience, and our bus drivers are such a critical part of this district, so important. And because it's the first person the kid sees when they go to their first day of school, and the last person they see when they're done with the school. And so it's critical, and safety is critical too. So, all right, with that, any other comments?
I just wanted to concur with Member Olson as well, that I'm glad to see this through to fruition. And we do have excellent bus drivers during the pandemic and the distance learning. I hear a lot of families and the students themselves say how much they miss their teacher as well as their bus driver. And I think our district is known for our bus drivers going above and beyond and really being those hometown bus drivers that know the kids, know the families, care deeply about the community. So I'm glad to see that this was ratified by that group and that they're happy with this year's contract.
All right. Well said. Thank you. Member Clerk, could you please take a roll call?
Okay, Member Olson.
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield.
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson.
Aye.
Member Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson is absent. Member Luthner votes aye. Member Corcoran.
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye. Member Ketto.
Aye.
Member Ketto votes aye.
All right. Thank you. And hang with me here. All right. Back. All right. 5-2, approve the 2020-2022 bus mechanics employment agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a ratified agreement with our bus mechanics, and administration is recommending approval of this ratified agreement that is as well within school board parameters. I'm recommending it with the following changes. You'll see on page 20 an adjustment to the 403B match, similar to the previous contract, a $250 annual district match increase. You will see on page 26 the addition of certifications that bus mechanics are eligible to obtain, and then a rate for those certifications if held by a mechanic. Those two certifications include DOT inspections as one, and EPA/fuel oil compliance certification. So a rate for those certifications if held by any of our mechanics. And then wage increases identified on page 28. And you'll see there a similar wage structure increase of 2% in the first year, 0 in the second year. And on page 29, you'll see the same MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, wage reopener language that we discussed earlier. And with that, administration recommends approval.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Steve, I'm just curious, how many bus mechanics do we have?
We are, I think it's 7 or 8, maybe 9. Mr. Martini, do you know that number offhand?
So there are 6.
There we go. Thank you.
All right. Member Luthner?
And I didn't get in on the last round of thanks for all the bus drivers, but I was going to add thank you to the mechanics and the rest of the staff, because often they find themselves driving a bus also. So a lot of these guys, people find themselves wearing more than one hat, and we never hear, but they don't get as many friendly waves and cookies at the holidays because they're not the regular driver, but they are keeping it running. And I know so many families are thankful that those buses are safe and sound and on the roads, and we trust our kids in them every day.
Yep.
So thank you. Thank you very much for keeping your skills up and going above and beyond every time.
Yeah, we definitely have a bus system we can be proud of. And with that, Member Luthner, could you take a roll call?
Okay. Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson is absent. Member Luthner votes aye. Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye. Member Ketto?
Aye.
Member Ketto votes aye. And Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye.
All right. And we have no new business. And with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, Member Luthner, could you take one last roll call?
Yes, I can. Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson is absent but would probably vote aye. Member Luthner votes aye. Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye. Member Ketto?
Aye.
Member Ketto votes aye. Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. And Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Rayfield votes aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Aye.